Rarely has a series of tapestries survived so completely until today. This is quite an unusual case, and is one of the reasons for the excellence and fame of this series. Like all artistic objects, tapestries need to be restored every now and then in order to regain their legibility. Compared to paintings, though, there's an added difficulty, especially regarding the lacunae. In other words, the missing areas usually caused by fires or sometimes by animals, for example, the holes eaten away by mice. These lacunae have to be repaired in order to resolve problems of structural stability. First and foremost, the restoration of tapestries has to re-establish the completeness of the structure, the warp and weft of the woven fabric that gives stability to the whole tapestry. The series, consisting of the tapestries of the months, was produced in Vigevano by a maestro who signed the month of February with his name, Benedetto da Milano. But the series was based on drawings by the painter Bartolomeo Suardi, known as the Bramantino. It is quite a rare case in which the assignment of the project was based on stylistic features and is not in doubt, while the attribution of place in maestro is provided by an inscription. The 12 tapestries of the months have a common layout, shared by all of them. The scene, characterizing each month, is enclosed within a cornice made up of 5 crests, which alternate. The 5 crests of Gian Giacomo Trivulzio, who commissioned the work, his 2 wives, his son, Giovanni Niccolò, together with his wife, Paola Gonzaga. In the middle of each scene, there is a representation of the month. The figure is seated, and around it are scenes depicting the agricultural produce for that time of year. There's a concentrated focus on the characteristics of the Lomellina region, where the Trivulzio family had its main feudal estates, and where the tapestries were originally woven. The focus on the month is also shown by the fact that, in the upper part of the cornice to the left and right of the seated figure, the sun is depicted with the typical characteristics of that month, therefore very bright in the summer months and a colder light for the winter months, as well as the zodiac sign distinguishing the month. Every figure representing a month makes a gesture to the right-hand side. This gesture is very theatrical, very obvious, and has been interpreted as a way of encouraging the reader to continue from one month to the next. Therefore, the tapestries were probably arranged in a circular layout, with anti-clockwise reading, so that each month moved on to the next one. The tapestries we see today are different from those produced in the Vigevano workshops, because the natural colors have faded due to the effect of sunlight and aging. Some shades of yellow have been completely lost, and the more stable colors like blue and red stand out vividly. A word must be said about the color change of the yarns used for restoration. Yarns treated not with natural dyes but with synthetic ones. These have also undergone color changes to the extent that some parts of the tapestries that we would expect to see in shadow as dark areas are actually becoming lighter. And in some cases, we find ourselves faced with a hue that reverses the effect of shadow, as can be seen on the drapery of some figures.
Clearly, these works come down to us after undergoing countless restorations, for which we have no documentation. My comments regard 2 tapestries to give an idea of the type of problems that were encountered and the methods used to repair them. The month of June had 4 large lacunae, which were caused by an accident, while the tapestry was folded in 4 like a sheet of paper. The 4 large gaps were repaired with the process then in use, that is, reconstructing the missing parts by reweaving and darning. In this case, the work was done very well from the mechanical point of view, but very roughly in the figurative sense, especially for parts of the background. The other tapestry I'm concerned with is the month of September, in which holes were probably caused by mice when the tapestry was folded in four along the vertical axis. This too was restored with reweaving and darning. I must say very well in figurative terms, if it was not for the poor quality of the dye used, late 19th century. The naked body of September's figure has undergone a colour change that is incongruous with the original flesh colour. The reasons for the tapestry's problems were basically the degradation of silk due to the effect of light and the molecular decay of the wool due to secondary reactions triggered by the dyeing process. The silk had few faults because there was very little silk in the tapestries, while on the other hand there were large areas of dark brown-black wool used as a background for architectural features. Looking closely at photographs, we can also see that to remedy these problems, the tapestries were mounted on fabric linings as a support. Faccioli noticed this, and once the linings were removed, he was faced by a large lacune. Restoration was carried out with the same procedure used in the 19th century, namely reweaving and darning. The four tapestries on which he worked were January, February, August and October, since they had multiple problems at that time. Once restoration and washing had been completed, Faccioli said, "We prefer to mount the lining in strips rather than as continuous material, which could worsen the smooth hanging of the tapestries."
An interesting aspect, looking at these tapestries, is to see the difference in overall effect that restored areas have with respect to one another. Some restoration works were carried out by weaving directly on the tapestry, inserting the warps, then reconstructing the missing parts, and reweaving the area as a continuation of the original design. Such a technique enabled the restorers to achieve absolute accuracy in linking the details. Unlike the month of June, for example, where the gaps were filled with large fabric patches, or pieces taken from other tapestries, adapted and then inserted into the tapestry. But there is no matching of the design, or with large pieces woven separately, based on a simplified design and then grafted into the tapestry. Using such a technique, it was impossible to match the details of design, and in fact, the imagination fills out the gaps, but the outlines do not match up with one another.
Prosegue la fantasia, ma non corrispondono le linee tra loro.
Why was a new operation adopted in 1988? An operation that was not real restoration, but effectively just maintenance? Because the tapestries were removed from the Bala Hall in the early 1970s. It was expected that they would be returned to the hall in the late 1980s, so a new system of display had to be devised. The linings were removed from the tapestries. Underneath the lining, restorers found reinforcing strips, which were used traditionally as braces to support the weight of the tapestry. The problem of hanging the tapestries was solved by using bands of sturdy cotton canvas in such a way that the tapestry is not simply hung from a seam along the top edge, but a series of vertical seams involving a wide area of the tapestry, in such a way that the weight is distributed over a broader surface. The cotton sateen that was used to make the new linings is impermeable to dust. The lining is slightly wider and is fixed by vertical seams which are equidistant, using a long stitch which provides some freedom of movement so that the lining can adapt to the tapestry and not vice versa.
I've carried out two projects of ordinary maintenance, one in 2003 and one in 2012. The first operation to be carried out is removing the dust deposits. The rough surface of the wool provides a good hold for the dust, which has to be removed not only for reasons of cleaning, but also to enable the humidity of the fibers to interact with the surroundings. The second operation is to check the woven fabric. As we've seen, the stitched seams of the tapestry can come apart, and we have to take action immediately as soon as such problems are spotted, to avoid uneven lengthening and distortion of the fabric. The third operation is checking the system of suspension. The tapestries are permanently hung, and the saying is that weight never sleeps, so the forces affecting the suspension system, or the upper edge of the tapestries, have to be kept under control and checked regularly.